The snow had fallen quietly overnight, blanketing the cracked sidewalks and peeling rooftops of Wheeler County, Georgia in a thin, white stillness. Detective Leighton McGraw eased his aging Crown Victoria into the driveway of a modest one-story home on Maple Street. The frost-covered windows of the house mirrored the chill running down his spine. A strip of yellow police line, "Do Not Cross" tape fluttered in the wind, roped around a porch that had seen better days. McGraw sat behind the wheel a moment longer than necessary, eyeing the file folder on the passenger seat. Monroe, Clarissa, age 29, female, correctional officer, deceased. He exhaled hard. Another young woman, another dead body, and it wasn't just any case. Clarissa wasn't some nameless victim. She was one of their own, a uniformed officer in one of Georgia's toughest prisons. McGraw reached for his gloves and stepped out into the brittle December air. The frost crunched beneath his boots as he walked toward the front door, where a uniformed officer nodded grimly and lifted the tape for him. "Morning, Detective," the young officer said. "Medical examiner's inside." "It's not pretty. I didn't expect it to be," McGraw replied, his gravel-thick voice cutting through the cold. Inside, the warmth was deceptive. Stale air mixed with the metallic tang of blood and something sickly sweet. Cheap perfume, maybe, or the early stages of decomposition. Either way, it clung to the walls like guilt. In the middle of the small living room, sprawled on worn carpet, was the body of Clarissa Monroe. She lay flat on her back, eyes wide open, a smear of dried blood across the collar of her white t-shirt. Her neck bore dark bruises and the unmistakable pattern of fingertip-shaped indentations. The medical examiner, Dr. Malcolm Hines, straightened his aging back as McGraw entered. He looked every bit the veteran, gray beard, furrowed brow, steady hands hardened by years of examining death. "Clarissa Monroe," he said, confirming. "Estimated time of death? 36 to 48 hours ago. Cause appears to be manual strangulation. Petechial hemorrhaging around the eyes. Broken capillaries. Defensive wounds, too." She fought hard. McGraw crouched beside the body. "She didn't go quietly." "No, sir. 2 broken fingernails, skin under both sets. You'll get DNA back soon." McGraw's gaze swept the room. A coffee table was flipped on its side. A mug shattered into pieces near a blood-stained couch cushion. A framed photo, Clarissa smiling with an older woman, maybe her mother, lay cracked on the floor. "This wasn't random," McGraw muttered. "She knew whoever did this. She let them in." He stood and turned toward the kitchen. "Who found the body?" "Friend. Works with her at Wheeler Correctional," a CSI called out from behind the camera tripod. "Name's Danielle Pierce. Says she came by after Clarissa missed 2 shifts and wasn't answering calls." "Where is she now?" "In the kitchen, with Officer Price." McGraw walked into the small kitchen where a tall, lean woman with coiled braids sat slumped at the table, hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup. Her eyes were red and swollen. She didn't look up as he entered. "Miss Pierce," he said gently. She lifted her gaze slowly, as if it took effort. "Yes, I'm Detective Leighton McGraw. I'm sorry for your loss." Danielle's lower lip quivered. I can't believe she's gone." Clarissa. She wasn't the type to just disappear." "You were close?" he asked, sitting across from her. "We worked together for almost 6 years. Friends even before that. We were like sisters." McGraw nodded slowly. "When was the last time you saw her alive?" "Tuesday night," Danielle answered. "End of her shift. We walked to the lot together. She looked tired, not just physically, like something was weighing on her. She hadn't been herself lately." "How so?" Danielle swallowed. "She used to be upbeat, full of sarcasm and stories. But in the last few months, she pulled back. Quiet, distracted. I asked if she was okay. She always said she was just tired." "How long ago did this start?" 3 months, maybe more. And when she didn't show up for work, I called, texted. Nothing. That's not like her. Tessa never missed work. Not without telling someone. I even called her mom. She hadn't heard from her either. That's when I came over this morning. The front door was unlocked. Her voice cracked. I found her like that." McGraw reached into his coat, pulled out a small notebook. Was Clarissa in a relationship? Danielle's hands trembled. Not that I knew of. After her last boyfriend, about a year ago, she said she was done dating for a while. But like I said, lately she'd been secretive. Secretive how? Danielle shifted. She started taking phone calls in private. Left the break room suddenly when her phone buzzed. Asked me to cover shifts without explanation. Said she had errands. I didn't ask questions. I should have. You were close, McGraw said quietly. He knew something was going on. I didn't want to push her, Danielle said. I figured she'd tell me when she was ready. McGraw closed his notebook. We'll talk again, Ms. Pierce. She nodded absently, staring into her cup like it held the past. As McGraw stepped back into the living room, one of the forensics techs approached, holding 2 clear bags. Detective, we found these. First one was in the bathroom trash, positive pregnancy test, dated 2 weeks ago. McGraw frowned. And the second? Nightstand drawer, antiretroviral medication, the kind prescribed for HIV treatment. His gut sank. Was she HIV positive? Could be. Could also be PrEP, prophylactic meds. Hard to say yet. Prescription was filled a month ago. McGraw stood silent a long moment, eyes falling once more on Clarissa's lifeless form. Pregnant. On HIV meds. No sign of forced entry. This wasn't just a homicide. This was a story with secrets still whispering in the walls. He turned to the tech. Bag everything. I'm headed to Wheeler Correctional. The Wheeler Correctional Facility loomed like a fortress, a gray concrete beast with guard towers like sentinels and razor wire that curled like thorns along every edge of the outer fence. Snow clung to the base of the walls, but the cold didn't reach the insides of this place. Here, the chill came from something deeper. Detective Leighton McGraw parked in the visitor's lot, shut off his engine, and sat a moment, staring through the windshield at the compound. A young corrections officer approached his car. Detective McGraw? That's me. Warden Gaines is expecting you. Follow me. Inside, the prison's administrative wing was all white tile and harsh fluorescence. The buzz of electric doors and distant boots on concrete echoed like a heartbeat behind bars. McGraw followed the officer through 2 secured checkpoints before entering the warden's office, a wood-paneled chamber that didn't match the rest of the sterile prison. Warden Charles Gaines rose from behind a large desk, heavy-set and confident, his gray buzz cut and square jaw evoking a former Marine who traded combat gear for paperwork and politics. Detective, he said, extending a firm hand. What an unfortunate situation. Clarissa Monroe was one of our best. McGraw didn't smile. He rarely did. She was found strangled in her home. I need to know what was going on inside your prison. Gaines motioned toward a chair. Please sit. I'll answer whatever I can. McGraw remained standing. How long had Clarissa worked here? Just over 3 years. Hired right out of Georgia State. Smart. Level-headed. Kept her head down. I never had to worry about her. Until recently. What changed? The warden sighed, leaning back in his leather chair. She started missing shifts. Came in late. Called in sick more often. Minor things, but out of character. Did you address it? I planned to. Had a note on my desk to pull her in next week for a check-in. Too late now. Did she ever mention having issues with inmates? Or other officers? Not to me, Gaines said. But I don't micromanage the floor guards. That's for the block supervisors. McGraw studied the man. Slick, polished, possibly too rehearsed. I'll need access to her locker, duty logs, and a list of her direct coworkers. Also, I want to review footage from the last 3 months, especially cell block C and B, and any interaction she had with inmates. Gaines shifted just slightly. That's a lot of footage, Detective. Our surveillance system isn't exactly cutting edge. So I've heard, McGraw said. We'll start with what you have. Gaines pressed a button on his desk phone. Officer Maxwell, escort Detective McGraw to the locker room and provide him access to Officer Monroe's personal effects. McGraw narrowed his eyes. And Warden? I'm going to ask you once. If there's anything going on in this facility, corruption, contraband, improper conduct, now is the time to tell me. The warden met his stare. There's nothing, Detective. We run a tight ship. McGraw didn't respond. He didn't believe him. The women's locker room was quiet, empty for now. McGraw stepped in behind Officer Maxwell, who unlocked Clarissa's metal locker with a spare key. The detective opened it slowly. Inside were the standard items: a pressed extra uniform, a travel-sized deodorant, a small mirror, and a framed photo of Clarissa and an older woman. Her mother, most likely. Nothing out of the ordinary. No notes. No journals. No phone. He closed it, frowning. Next, McGraw spent the better part of the afternoon conducting interviews with Clarissa's co-workers, fellow guards, supervisors, administrative staff. Most said the same thing. She was quiet, professional, didn't talk about her personal life. She did her job and went home. But one voice broke the pattern. Dwayne Langston, a veteran guard who'd been on Block B with Clarissa several times a week, leaned forward across the interview table. "She changed, Detective." "How so?" Dwayne rubbed his temple, started talking to herself, staring at the wall like she was somewhere else. "Once I caught her just standing there in the hallway, not moving. When I asked what was up, she jumped like I'd startled her out of a dream." "Anything else?" "Yeah," Dwayne said. "She was working Block B more often than usual. Kept swapping shifts with another guard, Danielle Pierce." McGraw paused. "Danielle again." "Yeah, Danielle would cover for her a lot. Or vice versa. They were tight. Always at each other's backs. But lately, I noticed them barely speaking. Like something changed." McGraw scribbled in his notebook. "Did she ever mention a particular inmate?" Dwayne shook his head. "No names. But I once caught her walking out of the supply room with a strange look. Didn't think much of it then. Now, I'm not so sure." That evening, McGraw sat alone in the prison surveillance review room, a converted office lined with humming monitors and old server towers. A prison technician, Clyde Harris, a twitchy man with a nervous voice, pulled up Clarissa's activity logs. "These are the main hallway feeds from the past month. Anything before that? Well, we had some data loss. Storage malfunction. Block B and some of the auxiliary cameras got corrupted." "Is that so?" McGraw said flatly. Harris looked anxious. "There's no cover-up, sir. The system's ancient. I've filed for upgrades for years. Show me what you've got." Hours passed. Clarissa's figure appeared again and again on screen, walking the cell blocks, making her rounds, talking briefly with coworkers. Routine. But it wasn't the normal moments that stood out. It was the subtle ones. In 2 different clips, Jeremiah Talley, tall, clean-cut, unusually composed for an inmate, appeared in the same hallway. As Clarissa passed him a clipboard, their fingers lingered just a second too long. Another clip showed them speaking in a corner, just out of microphone range, Clarissa's body slightly leaned in. If McGraw hadn't been a cop for 30 years, he might have missed it. But he saw it clearly now. This wasn't just some friendly officer-inmate rapport, he muttered. He leaned forward. "Pause that." On the screen, Clarissa looking over her shoulder, eyes scanning the hallway. Then she quickly stepped through a supply room door. Seconds later, Jeremiah followed. The door closed behind them. No footage inside. McGraw stood. "I need to talk to Jeremiah Talley." Now, the interrogation room in Wheeler Correctional wasn't anything fancy. No two-way mirror. No hidden mic. Just 4 gray walls, 1 bolted-down table, and 2 chairs screwed into the concrete floor. The kind of place where secrets either surfaced or buried themselves deeper. Detective Leighton McGraw sat across from Jeremiah Talley, the inmate who had appeared just a little too often in Clarissa Monroe's final weeks. Talley wore a tan prison jumpsuit that hung loose on his frame, but his posture was upright, controlled. He wasn't some twitchy thug. He held himself like a man with nothing left to lose, or maybe something he still wanted to protect. He looked younger than 35, with sharp cheekbones and a calm, unreadable expression. His hands, cuffed at the wrist, rested loosely on the table. His eyes never left McGraw's. McGraw slid a file onto the table, but didn't open it. Jeremiah Talley. Armed robbery. 3 counts. No parole for another 8 years. Yet somehow, in all that time, you managed to become the center of a homicide investigation. Quite the resume. Jeremiah smirked faintly. "I didn't kill Clarissa, Detective." "You didn't ask if she was dead," McGraw replied coldly. "You used her first name." "That's interesting." The smirk vanished. "I heard about what happened," Jeremiah said quietly. It's been going around the block. Some guys are angry. Clarissa wasn't just another guard. She treated people with respect. More than respect, it seems, McGraw said, flipping open the file. We found a pregnancy test in her bathroom. Positive. About 6 weeks. We also found a bottle of antiretrovirals, the kind used to treat or prevent HIV. Jeremiah's hands tensed. His jaw clenched. I didn't know she was pregnant, he said after a beat. Swear to God. McGraw leaned forward, locking eyes with him. But you knew she was taking HIV meds. Because you're HIV positive, and she was sleeping with you, wasn't she? Jeremiah's eyes dropped to the table. For the first time, he looked shaken. Not afraid, but hurt. She knew, he whispered. She always knew. I told her from the start. Start of what? The relationship, he said. We didn't just hook up one day. It started with conversations. Books. Music. She'd leave her reading list in the break room. I talk about old jazz records. She listened. No one ever really listened to me before. McGraw's tone sharpened. She was an officer. You're an inmate. That relationship should have never happened. I know, Jeremiah said quickly. Believe me, I know how messed up it sounds. But it wasn't about power or manipulation. It was real. She wasn't naive. She was brave. She believed in second chances. Hell, she gave me mine. And what was your plan? McGraw asked. Build a life together after you got out? Raise a child while you're still in Orange. Jeremiah's eyes glistened, but his voice remained level. She said she'd wait. She was in a quit. Said she couldn't stay here anymore. Too much dirt, too many lies. McGraw straightened. What do you mean, dirt? Jeremiah looked around the room. Paused. You know what's going on in this place, detective. You've been here half a day and already seen it. Spell it out. Guards bringing in contraband. Warden Gaines running side deals with outside suppliers. Money, drugs, phones. Clarissa stumbled into it. Took pictures. Names. Dates. She hid it all away. Said she'd go to the Department of Corrections when she had everything. McGraw made a mental note. And you helped her collect this evidence? I warned her to be careful. Told her these people, they'd eat her alive if they found out. But she wouldn't stop. Said she couldn't live with herself if she stayed silent. McGraw flipped through his notebook. What about Danielle Pierce? Jeremiah blinked, surprised. She and Clarissa were close for years. But lately, something shifted. Imani started watching her more, asking questions. Once, Clarissa told me they'd fought bad. She came back shaken, said Danielle accused her of betraying their friendship. Did Clarissa ever say Danielle knew about the pregnancy? She never even told me about the pregnancy, Jeremiah said, voice low. But I bet Danielle knew something. She always knew too much. McGraw stood. You're not stupid, Tally. You know what I'm asking next. Who do you think killed her? Jeremiah looked up, eyes tired. Honestly, I think Clarissa was surrounded by people who couldn't stand her trying to do the right thing. And one of them snapped. Later that night, McGraw sat alone in his hotel room, reviewing the footage again. The hallway glances, the soft touches, the stolen moments in the storage closet. He didn't see manipulation. He saw affection. Real. Dangerous. Damning. Then he opened the evidence folder again. The antiretrovirals. The test strip. Her phone records. Danielle's number popped up over 200 times in the last 3 months, until 3 weeks ago. After that, 3 short calls. Then nothing. That shift in communication, the coverage shifts, the argument Clarissa had with Jeremiah about Danielle. McGraw whispered to himself. She knew. He reached for his phone and dialed a number. Dispatch, this is Detective McGraw. I need a copy of all recorded shifts, security footage, and visitor logs for Officer Danielle Pierce. I want a search team ready. I think Clarissa left something behind. Sunday morning broke cold and blindingly bright, the snow outside glistening like crushed glass under a pale sun. But inside the walls of the Wheeler County Police Department, Detective Leighton McGraw was already pacing the floor of the evidence room, a styrofoam cup of burnt black coffee in one hand and a thick folder in the other. Clarissa Monroe had been strangled in her own home, pregnant, in a secret relationship with an HIV-positive inmate, and she was planning to blow the whistle on a major corruption ring within her workplace. But none of it explained one thing. Why now? Why kill her just when she was finally trying to leave? McGraw's eyes swept over the folder again, then the room. But it was his gut, not the paper trail, that pushed him back toward Clarissa's home. The house was quiet now, sealed off, dust settling back into its corners. No more flashing lights or crime scene chatter. Just stillness. McGraw stood in her bedroom, the one place the killer wouldn't have staged or cleaned. He scanned the bookshelf again, cookbooks, poetry, some worn paperback thrillers. And then his eyes landed on it. A thin blue spine. The collected poems of Lucille Clifton. He pulled it out. It felt heavier than it should. He flipped the pages, and something fell into his palm. A flash drive. He didn't waste a second. Back at the station, the text worked fast. In less than 10 minutes, a full directory popped up on the screen. Folders labeled Ward_Gaines, Pierce_ logs, transactions, and more. Photos, notes, screenshots, dates, locations. Clarissa had been methodical, almost surgical. She documented every dirty shift, every unlogged inmate transfer, every unmarked box that came in through the south gate. There were even photos of Warden Gaines himself exchanging envelopes with a man in a parking lot. But that wasn't what made McGraw's blood run cold. Inside the folder marked personal_notes, he found several journal entries. Clarissa's words. Typed save raw. Danielle's been acting strange. At first I thought she was just overprotective, but now she's watching me. Asking questions about who I talk to, why I stay late. Once I caught her going through my locker. I didn't say anything. Maybe I should have. I think she knows about Jay. I think she saw us. And if she finds out about the baby, I'm scared of what she might do. McGraw sat back in his chair. Every instinct in his body suddenly felt like a hammer striking the same nail. Danielle Pierce wasn't just jealous. She was unraveling. The warrant came through that afternoon. By dusk, McGraw and 2 officers were knocking on the door of Danielle's apartment. She opened it slowly, wearing a faded college sweatshirt and no makeup. Her face looked pale, not the kind of pale from grief, the kind from holding your breath too long. "Detective," she said, trying to sound surprised. "We have a warrant to search the premises," McGraw replied, showing the document. "Please stay seated while my team looks around." Danielle backed up silently and sank onto the couch, watching as officers moved through her home. 15 minutes later, an officer called out from the bedroom. "Detective, you need to see this." Underneath the mattress was a sealed envelope filled with $5,000 in cash. In her closet, a small box held 3 luxury men's watches and a gold ring still in its case. Bribery artifacts, no doubt. Possibly from the same operation Clarissa had been documenting. But it was in the desk drawer that McGraw found the final crack in the dam. A leather-bound journal. He opened it carefully. At first, the entries were ordinary, lunch dates, complaints about the weather, work schedules. But then they turned. Darker. Sharper. "I've loved her since we were kids. 10 years. And she still looks at everyone else but me. She doesn't even realize how much I do for her. The extra shifts. The risks. The lies I told for her. I saw the test. She's pregnant. With his baby. That low-life criminal. She threw everything away for him. Everything I would have given her freely." McGraw closed the journal slowly. It wasn't just jealousy. It was possession, obsession, betrayal. He stepped back into the living room, met Danielle's eyes. They were already glistening. "You found it," she whispered. The interrogation room was quiet. The fluorescent light above flickered just once. A soft hum in an otherwise breathless space. Danielle Pierce sat hunched at the table, her fingers laced, knuckles white. She wasn't handcuffed. Not yet. But she didn't look like she was going anywhere. Across from her, Detective Leighton McGraw flipped through her journal, page by page, like peeling wallpaper off a ruined house. "You wrote this the night Clarissa was killed," he said without looking up. "Did you think no one would find it?" Danielle stared at the wall behind him, eyes hollow, jaw tight. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, "I didn't want to hurt her." McGraw looked up. "But you did." Her voice came out small, choked, like she was speaking through water. "I loved her," she whispered. "I believe that," McGraw said. "But love isn't the same thing as ownership." Danielle's eyes narrowed, sharp suddenly. "You think I don't know that? You think I didn't tell myself that every day for the last 10 years. McGraw said nothing. Let the silence do its work. She was everything. Danielle continued, her voice cracking. Since middle school. When I got jumped by 3 girls, Clarissa pulled them off me. She had this fire, even then. Protected me like I was hers. She blinked fast, her throat bobbing. I thought, one day, she'd look at me and see it. All of it. That I'd been there the whole time. That I loved her. Not like a friend. Not like a sister. Really loved her. But she didn't, McGraw said, his voice even. Danielle gave a bitter laugh, half sob, half spite. She said I was family, she said. She said she loved me too, just not that way. I should have let it go. I tried. God knows I tried. McGraw leaned forward. Then Jeremiah Talley happened. Danielle's jaw clenched again. She started acting different. Missing shifts. Lying. Asking me to cover for her. At first I thought she was seeing someone. I didn't want to believe it. But one night, she left her phone on the break room table. It buzzed. I picked it up. The message just said, "Miss you. See you at our place tonight." McGraw folded his hands. That's when you knew. I knew. Danielle nodded, eyes wet but fierce. And she didn't even try to hide it. When I asked her, she confessed like it was nothing. Like it was just love. Love with a criminal. An inmate. Someone who could never love her the way I did. Her voice sharpened, ragged. I begged her to stop. Told her it was dangerous. Told her he was using her. That he was HIV positive. She told me she didn't care. She was on medication. She said love was worth the risk. And that broke you. Danielle looked at McGraw like she'd just realized something herself. It wasn't the HIV. It wasn't even the relationship. It was, she exhaled, it was the baby. McGraw nodded slowly. You found the pregnancy test. In her gym bag, Danielle confirmed. I was helping her unload groceries. The bag tipped. It fell out. I saw the result. She didn't even try to lie this time. She smiled. Danielle's voice twisted. She smiled and said she was going to quit, run off, wait for him to get released, start a family. And you knew, McGraw said softly, that there'd never be a place for you in that future. Danielle wiped her face with the back of her hand. The tears didn't stop. I used Jeremiah's phone, she said. I'd used it before. She gave it to me once when he needed to pass along a message. I still had it in my locker. You texted her. I told her to come over. Told her we needed to talk. That I loved her, that we could figure it out. I thought maybe if I just showed her how deep I felt. McGraw raised an eyebrow. But she laughed. Danielle looked gutted. She laughed and said I was delusional. Said she loved me like a sister. That what I wanted, it was never going to happen. She pressed her palms against her eyes. I lost it. I don't even remember how it started. We were yelling. She called me selfish. Said I needed help. She turned to walk out. I grabbed her arm. She tried to pull away. Danielle's hands were shaking now. Then I had her neck. And she was screaming. And then she wasn't. A silence fell between them, thick and final. Danielle looked up, exhausted. I didn't want to kill her. I couldn't stand the thought of losing her. Of her loving someone else. Him. That baby. McGraw studied her. Not with sympathy, but with understanding, the grim, bitter kind. You didn't kill her because you loved her, Danielle. You killed her because she loved someone else. Danielle didn't respond. Didn't argue. Instead, she folded her hands on the table and whispered, "Do what you have to." McGraw stood. I already have. A week after the arrest, Clarissa Monroe was laid to rest beneath a towering oak in Wheeler Memorial Cemetery. The wind carried the faint smell of pine, and the air, though clear, held the bitter bite of winter. Snow flurries drifted like ash as the crowd gathered. Family, friends, co-workers, and one man in chains. Jeremiah Talley stood in silence between 2 armed corrections officers, wrists cuffed, ankles shackled. His beige jumpsuit clashed with the black suits and veils around him. But his face, unreadable, still, and wet with tears, belonged to someone who had lost everything. Detective Leighton McGraw stood a few yards away, his hands tucked in his coat pockets, shoulders hunched against the wind. He wasn't there out of duty. Not anymore. He was there for the silence Clarissa left behind. The questions, the pain, the echoes of what might have been. The minister's voice drifted over the grave, soft and worn with age. She sought to bring light where there was darkness. In a world of concrete and steel, she tried to believe in redemption. That takes courage, and sometimes it takes everything. Clarissa's mother sobbed quietly into the shoulder of a family friend. Danielle Pierce was nowhere to be seen. She was in holding, awaiting arraignment. The system she helped poison would now judge her. And Clarissa? Clarissa was now only memory and soil. When the last words were said and the casket lowered, the crowd began to drift away in slow, quiet ripples. McGraw approached Jeremiah. One of the officers instinctively blocked him, but McGraw raised a hand calmly. "It's all right," he said. "Just a minute." The guard hesitated, then stepped back. Jeremiah turned, eyes hollow but focused. "Detective, I wanted to say I'm sorry," McGraw said. "For your loss. For everything." Jeremiah let out a breath that wasn't quite a sigh. "She was the first person in my life who didn't look at me like I was a mistake." McGraw nodded. "She believed in you. She believed in a lot of people," Jeremiah said, voice cracking. "Even ones who didn't deserve it." He looked toward the grave again. "You know, I used to count the days to my release. Now I don't think about it." McGraw shifted. "She left something behind, you know. The evidence she collected. It's enough to bring down the whole operation." Jeremiah raised an eyebrow. "Gaines. Warden Charles Gaines, 3 officers, and a prison contractor, all indicted as of this morning. Federal charges are pending." A faint, grim smile tugged at the corner of Jeremiah's mouth. She did it, even after they tried to silence her. McGraw looked down at the fresh mound of dirt. "She paid for it." Jeremiah nodded slowly. "So did Danielle." The 2 men stood quietly for a beat, snow dusting their shoulders, before a guard tapped Jeremiah's elbow. "Time to go." Jeremiah looked at McGraw one last time. "You think she forgave me?" "For what?" "For letting her fall in love with a dead man walking." McGraw's eyes narrowed, but there was no anger in his voice, only something heavier. "She didn't fall in love with a dead man, Tally. She fell in love with a man who made her feel alive." Jeremiah turned, chains rattling as he was led away. That night, McGraw returned to his apartment, a quiet space filled with the hum of an old heater and the tick of a wall clock no one had wound in days. He set his badge on the kitchen counter and poured a small glass of bourbon. He sat in his worn recliner, eyes fixed on the ceiling, Clarissa's voice echoing in his mind through the file she left behind. "They'll say I broke the rules. Maybe I did. But if loving someone who showed me hope is a crime, then so is surviving in a place like this." He raised his glass in a silent toast. To hope, and to the cost of chasing it. The bourbon burned on the way down. Outside, the snow began to fall again, quiet and relentless. By the time the press conference was held on the steps of the Georgia Department of Corrections, snow had melted into slush and whispers had hardened into outrage. Microphones jutted like bayonets. Cameras clicked with mechanical hunger. Reporters jostled for sound bites, headlines forming before the words even left the mouths of officials. An internal investigation revealed systemic corruption within Wheeler Correctional Facility, the Attorney General announced. "Thanks to evidence provided by Officer Clarissa Monroe before her death, we have issued indictments against Warden Charles Gaines, 3 officers, and an outside contractor involved in trafficking illicit goods into the prison." Behind the podium, Detective Leighton McGraw stood still as a statue, his overcoat flapping gently in the wind. He didn't want the spotlight. He didn't need his name etched into some official transcript. He'd done his job. But standing there, he wasn't thinking about the charges or the cameras. He was thinking about a young woman with a spine of steel who died protecting the truth no one else dared name. Back at the station, the mood was different. No backslaps, no champagne corks, just quiet nods and the rustling of paperwork. McGraw sat in the break room, nursing lukewarm coffee and rereading Clarissa's notes, her own typed manifesto of right and wrong. She had been collecting evidence for 4 months, cross-referencing surveillance failures, photographing illicit deliveries, and documenting shift swaps that had been altered to create blind spots. Danielle Pierce's name showed up more than anyone else's. "Hell of a case," Sergeant Clay Matthews said, leaning in the doorway. "Could have gone a dozen ways. If you hadn't pushed." McGraw interrupted him flatly. She did all the pushing. I just followed the pieces she left behind. Matthews nodded, then glanced at the TV mounted in the corner. The evening news was running a segment. Prison guard turned whistleblower, hero or rule breaker? McGraw's jaw tightened. That's how the world worked. The ones who sacrificed the most were always redefined by those who survived them. And Clarissa? She would be judged not only for who she loved, but for breaking an oath to protect the one thing no institution could guarantee: hope. 2 days later, McGraw visited Clarissa's mother, Ms. Lorraine Monroe. Her home smelled like lavender and lemon polish. The same photo of Clarissa, the one from her locker, sat on the mantel, flanked by a flickering candle and a vase of wilting lilies. Lorraine poured tea with trembling hands. I keep asking myself, she said quietly, if I could have done something. If I'd asked more questions. If I just looked her in the eye and seen what was happening. She didn't want you to worry, McGraw replied. She carried too much on her own. Lorraine dabbed her eyes. Was it true, what they said about her and that inmate? Yes, McGraw answered, without hesitation. But it wasn't shameful. It wasn't weakness. She saw humanity where others saw statistics. And she believed he could be better. That sounds like her, Lorraine whispered, smiling sadly. She always tried to fix what was broken. McGraw set down his cup. She wasn't trying to fix him. She was trying to fix the system that kept him broken. On his last day on the case, McGraw stood alone in the now-abandoned office of Warden Charles Gaines. The shelves had been cleared. The leather chair behind the desk sat empty. But on the floor, wedged behind the radiator, was a slip of paper, likely missed during the sweep. McGraw bent down and pulled it out. It was a transfer request form, signed by Clarissa Monroe, dated 2 days before her death. She had planned to leave, to walk away from it all, but someone made sure she never got the chance. He folded the paper and tucked it into his coat pocket, not as evidence, but as a keepsake, a silent reminder that sometimes the truth came too late. Outside, the air had warmed just enough to feel the season shifting. Snow had begun to melt in the gutters. Trees, bare and rigid, whispered of spring. McGraw walked slowly to his car, hands deep in his pockets, head bowed. Clarissa's case was closed. Danielle would face trial. The prison would undergo reforms. Warden Gaines would likely die behind bars. But justice? Justice was more complicated, because at the heart of it all wasn't just crime or punishment. It was longing, obsession, sacrifice. It was a woman who had dared to believe that love, even in the darkest place, might still mean something. McGraw opened the door to his car, paused, then looked back one last time at the prison gates. A place built to keep people in, and yet somehow it had taken everything from her. 3 weeks after the funeral, the precinct's evidence room received a package in a plain manila envelope. No return address. Only McGraw's name written in block letters across the front. Inside was a small voice recorder. Taped to it was a yellow sticky note. If anything ever happens to me, give this to McGraw. It was signed, shakily, in blue ink, C. Monroe. Detective Leighton McGraw sat alone in his office, door closed, blinds drawn, the room dim except for the glow of a desk lamp. He pressed play. Clarissa's voice came through, soft, steady, and hauntingly alive. If you're listening to this, it means I didn't make it. Maybe I was foolish to think I could take on something this big. Maybe I should have kept my head down like everyone else. But I couldn't. I've seen too much. The walls of this prison don't just hold inmates. They protect predators in uniforms. They pass envelopes in silence and pretend it's all procedure. But it's not. It's poison. And I can't let it keep spreading. McGraw leaned back in his chair, heart thudding. There's something else I need you to know. About Jay. About Jeremiah. I know how it looks. I know the rules I broke. But he saw me, not as an officer, not as someone with a badge, as a human being. He never lied to me, never hurt me. He respected me, more than some people I've known my whole life. And Danielle, her voice hitched. God, I wish I could have saved her from herself. I wish I'd seen the signs. Maybe I was too selfish, too blind. Maybe I believed love could exist without collateral damage. I was wrong. But if there's one thing I hope comes from all this, it's that someone keeps fighting. That someone knows I didn't die for nothing. The recording ended with a soft click. McGraw sat motionless, staring at the far wall as Clarissa's words echoed in the silence. She hadn't just left behind evidence. She'd left behind a mission, and a wound that the truth alone couldn't close. Weeks turned into months. The trial of Danielle Pierce was set for spring. Prosecutors prepared for a high-profile case, one splashed across headlines and dissected on talk shows. The defense leaned into mental instability, trauma, unrequited love, emotional deterioration. Jeremiah Talley remained behind bars, but a growing number of advocates called for his early release, citing Clarissa's testimony, the abuse she'd uncovered, and the absence of any criminal intent on his part. Meanwhile, Wheeler Correctional Facility underwent a sweeping overhaul. Warden Gaines had turned state's evidence, exposing a broader web of corruption that stretched into state contracts and private security firms. He'd cut a deal, but not even that would save him from a life sentence. It wouldn't bring Clarissa back, but it would change the system she died trying to fix. On a quiet April morning, McGraw visited the cemetery again. The snow was gone now, replaced by soft grass and blooming dogwood trees. He carried a small bouquet of sunflowers, Clarissa's favorite, according to her mother, and knelt by the headstone. Clarissa Monroe, 1994 to 2024. She saw light where others saw none. He set the flowers down gently and pulled something from his coat pocket. The transfer request form. He kept it all this time. He unfolded it, smoothed the creases with his thumb, and placed it beside the flowers. "You were ready to walk away," he murmured. "But you stayed. You stayed long enough to do what most people never would." A breeze stirred the branches above, and for a brief moment, it felt like the world exhaled with him. "You weren't naive, Clarissa," he added. "You were brave. Too damn brave." He stood, tipping his hat to the stone, and walked slowly back toward his car. As he drove through the sleepy streets of Wheeler County, McGraw thought about everything Clarissa had left behind. The flash drive, the journal entries, the silent stares and grainy security footage, and finally, the voice on that recorder. People would tell her story in 100 different ways. Some would call her reckless. Others would call her a hero. A few would only remember the scandal. But McGraw? He'd remember a woman who loved without apology, fought without permission, and died without fear. And that, he thought, was the rarest kind of courage.